So as the nights draw in and we start losing the sunlight, it's a perfect time of year to start making wreaths. They aren't just for Christmas. I'm going to show you how to make a gorgeous ombre wreath using fresh evergreens and also dried elements. It's going to be something really wonderful, something that you can do whatever your age, whatever your skill, and it's just a really calming and meditative way to spend a cozy evening. So you can see that I have placed all my ingredients in colour order, which is really important. It's a bit like when you're cooking, you want to have all your ingredients laid out. It keeps everything nice and simple and just means that you can reach for things really easily. Neatness is the name of the game in floristry. So in my work, I really try and create depth and texture and movement. So it's really important to me when I'm choosing materials to look at everything in terms of colour, texture, if things are spiky, if things are smooth, if things are translucent. I kind of really love when things are just a real mixture, and that's when you get most depth and most beauty, I believe. So we've got conifer over here. I've tried to choose things obviously that are in season and that a lot of us may have in our gardens. Then we've got some Douglas fir, which again is just really lovely. It's not too thick and it just really works well for wreaths this size. I always like to add in some kind of edible. So we've got rosemary here. So it gives another green, but also another texture and fragrance. Then I've got some eucalyptus, which is quite nice. We want to have like a little pop of extra colour in there. And then we've got some Senecio, which I love because it's got two different sides to it. That just works really well. Then we've got Magnolia, does the same thing. It gives you two things. You've got the brown on the back and then the real glossy green on the front. You've got dried bracken, which I really, really love working with. I think it looks fantastic. And then I've just basically used, this time of year when I'm doing a wreath like this, it's a really nice opportunity to use up the things that I've got left in the studio. So I've got some like barley, some grasses, some thistle that I dried early in the year, got some straw flower, some limonium. So all these things together will make something really exciting and just something a little bit new and different than just a standard wreath that's all one colour. So first of all, I'm going to attach my, I've got my real wire here, which is forest wire that we use a lot at this time of year. And it's really, really strong, so you really don't need too much. And it's just really handy for all sorts of crafts. So I'm going to attach it. I've got a 12-inch copper wreath frame here. So all you need to do is you've got your wire here. We attach it on like this. I've just popped it through the top. Leave about 2 inches above. And then you just get the rest and you just twirl it around. So again, you don't need to have a really huge bit of wire sticking out, like 1 to 2 inches is fine. And you're just spiraling that round. And that will be really secure and it's not going anywhere. And we don't cut that off until the very end, so it stays on the whole entire time. So the best moss to use when you're making wreaths is sphagnum moss, but you want to make sure that you get it from a sustainable source, such as your local florist. I get it from New Covent Garden Flower Market. You don't want to be taking it from the forest floor because it is really a huge part of the ecosystem. So just a good tip, make sure that you know that you're sourcing it sustainably. Now we're just going to keep on adding on the moss. So how much of the wire do you need to use? I have intervals of 1 inch or 1.5 inches between each section of wire that I loop over. So there's one. So I wouldn't kind of do that. That's about 1 centimetre. I'd leave about 1 inch. That's all it needs because it will just naturally stay together. As you can see, I've covered the entire base in the moss, and I actually think that looks really nice just as it is as well. So making a wreath is essentially getting bunches and placing them onto the wreath frame. So I've now cut up all my fresh ingredients. So I've got everything here. So I'm going to start by making my first bunch. So if you see, I've got this conifer here. Now what I wouldn't do is put that probably on top because that is so pretty. And this is quite long. So I would tend to kind of put that at the back. And then if you did want to put it on top, it's always nice to have maybe a little, like stagger your pieces. What you don't want to do is as you're adding your bunches, just to put everything at the same height. Because then you're just going to get a chunky bunch and you're just going to get interest at the top. So what we do is when we add pieces, we kind of slightly stagger them down. So then I can put the conifer on top, but I staggered it down like that. And that just gives so much air and space. You don't end up with a really bulky bunch, and all the ingredients can sing. So then you can see if I add something else in, how completely different it is. And this is where your personality will come into it. So you want to make sure that all your bunches are very similar in width and also height for that uniformity, which will make it just look very elevated and professional. So sometimes you don't need to worry too much about removing foliage. It's not like a cut flower vase arrangement. But as we're going to be putting the wire around, I do kind of take off anything too bulky. And also, it can get very heavy as you keep going. So I kind of remove everything that's not going to be seen, which is this bit here. So I've got my first bunch there. So then I've got my wreath still with the wire on, and I'm going to add it on. So I'm going to add on my first. And you always want to kind of follow the wreath around. I've seen people make them like this, which you don't want to do. You want to make sure it's following the circle. So I'm going to put this one my first one slightly towards the inside, and then I wrap it around once or twice, depending on how heavy your material is. If you're using very heavy branches, if you're using magnolia, you might want to wrap it around more times than that. And I've already cut my bunch down, so you don't want loads of stem. You want to make sure that it's kind of nice and neat. So now I've got my second bunch. I have duplicated the ingredients, but it's really up to you. You don't have to put everything in exactly the same sequence. It's really nice to have some, things that are not exactly the same in your bunches. So now I'm adding in my second bunch. So as you can see, I've got the first one there, and all we want to do is just cover this here. So what we wouldn't do is put it here, because obviously you can still see the moss. You wouldn't want to put your next bunch on top of it, because we're just kind of obliterating what we've just done. So we just want to stagger it down. So I'm just covering that, but I can still see maybe 2/3 of that first bunch. And there, I've only got 2 bunches, but you can already see that you don't need a huge amount to cover your wreath. That's just 2 bunches. So finishing this is just rinse and repeat. We're just doing the same thing again and again. And actually it's really mindful, and it's really easy and simple. And I love the process of doing it. I find it very meditative. So as you can see, we're halfway through. And I'm stopping here because this is an ombre wreath. So what is ombre? Ombre is a graduation of colour from dark to light or light to dark. So I want to stop here because I'm going to start that process of adding different materials in, the dried materials, which will take us from green into brown, then into more creamy colours. And it's the same process of doing bunches. I'm just using different dried ingredients, but the technique is exactly the same. And I just love bracken because it's so tactile and crunchy, and it's just so beautiful. Now I'm going to pop it on. So my next one, I do want to start introducing more ingredients, because actually we've only got half of the wreath ring left. So I've got my bracken here, and then I'm going to add in a teasel, which is great, like that. So I'm going to add that on. So then you can see that we've moved from green into the brown. So now I'm going to add maybe this is actually corn grass, which is lovely. So that will take us from that deeper brown into a more dusky brown. And then I'm going to add in some of the thistle. This is actually from my garden that I dried, because that's got a hint of green, but it also has a hint of brown. So I feel that's a really nice transition going from the bracken, and it's still kind of speaking to the evergreens because there is that green in there. Again, cut it down, add it on. So there we can see we're moving. Our colour gradient is moving along, which is exactly what we want. So then I'm going to keep on building, getting lighter and lighter. So as you can see, I have added all the bundles on. And you can see the graduation. We've gone from this beautiful green into the dusky browns of the bracken, and then we've gone lighter and lighter. And we're finishing up with our final and lightest bunch here, which is filled with a lot of the honesty and straw flower and a tiny amount of very faded amaranthus in there as well. So adding on your last bunch, what you want to make sure is that you lift up that first bunch that you put on. I could leave it like that, but it's going to look so much better if I just add in that one more bunch there. And don't be scared about lifting it up. It's really secure. It's tied on with that wire. So don't be shy. Just get right underneath and add your last bunch in. So now we're at the end, and this is the moment which I do pull quite hard, because you obviously don't want anything to unravel. So you pull your real wire quite hard, and then this is the moment when we actually take it off. So you want to leave yourself a good, I say if you're the first time doing this, leave a good kind of 30 centimeters. It's easier to cut wire down than obviously add it on. So I'm going to cut probably about 20 to 25 centimeters of length that I've left there, cut that off. And do be careful, because that can be very sharp, the end, once you've cut it. And then to finish off, you turn your wreath around. What you want to do is find the top of the wire frame underneath. And sometimes I just use my finger just to scrape back that moss, and you'll soon be able to see it. I can see it there. And what we want to do is thread that wire underneath and over. So essentially what we're doing is making sure it's very securely tied to that wire frame to finish off. I probably do it, again, depending on the heaviness of your materials, I tend to do it 3 times, just to make sure. If you're using much heavier pine or you're doing a much bigger wreath, you might want to do it more. And then what I do, just to make sure it's really secure, is then loop it back through. So essentially you're tying a knot like that. So then with that length, we don't want that. So I leave a kind of 1.5 inches. And then what I do is I would never leave like that. You wouldn't want it to scratch your door. I fold it back on itself into the moss. So that sharp end isn't going to hurt either anyone else or your front door. And then turn it over, and there you will see your beautiful ombre wreath.